So, guys, my name is Santiago. I'm calling from Spain. CINEMANIA is the name of my magazine. So pleased to meet you. Thank you for having us.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having us.
I had a great time watching this movie. And one of the things I asked your colleagues or the other actors and JD was, how do you balance the fact that you are at the same time telling a story about a dark period of time and you are being so entertaining and so amusing? I mean, can tragedy be entertaining?
Yeah, I got you. I would say that tragedy, the essence of tragedy, right? So theater, right? A tragedy is essentially where your protagonist learns a irredeemable lesson at the end, right? Oedipus, Medea, where there is no recourse from the actions that they played, right? So Macbeth, there is no recourse from that. Othello, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the gift of a tragedy is that it is to enlighten, right, and to push the audience forward, so they do not make that same mistake. Versus a comedy where essentially it's the unification of the protagonist and blah blah blah, and the antagonist, blah blah blah. So tragedies, in many ways, are the things that move culture forward, right? And therefore, the best way to tell a tragedy is to, we're talking about a tragedy, not tragedy. A tragedy is to hook the audience with things that they can connect to that do entertain them and stimulate them in a certain way as to get them to that finish line of tragedy, to have that moment of catharsis and hopefully propel that change, versus just medicine, right? Versus just medicine and propaganda, which Glenn and I and Black Label and Sony and anyone any of our colleagues have no real time for.
Well, that was such a great answer. Jonathan, let me ask you.
I knew to look at the right guy.
You have the right guy in the air and in the press junket. So, Jonathan, let me ask you another question, because through your career you have, and through your work, you have talked about racism. And your characters have done that. You have reflected on that, on that situation many times. How is it different to do it in a movie, let's say with Spike Lee, or in a movie like this, with what that feels more like a blockbuster?
Blockbuster. You heard it here first. Well, I would say it's the delivery of it. I essentially, I only have one way of doing something. It does shift and change, but my essential attack or approach on a character or an art form or the art form is the same. I mean, since 1776, we people, members of the African diaspora, Black folks, have had to deal with slavery. So any story post the Emancipation Proclamation is about slavery. Any story after is about the repercussions of that, or those repercussions are within the given circumstances. So the cool part about this, it being a blockbuster, is that it has a bit more energy to it. It's got a bit more, the forum is larger. You know what I mean? And so the story can hold more colors and contrast and nuance, but again, that has to do with the people helping us put it into the world. Sony, I think, is what is making it a blockbuster. You know what I mean? I think JD and Glenn and myself and Christina Jackson, et cetera, our beautiful cast, we were trying to tell a story, and then from the friction of the story and the heat of the story, someone saw the potential of giving this to the masses, and that's what makes it a blockbuster. But I just try to not get fired every day.
That makes sense. One last question for you, Glenn, and I I'm sorry to make this question because we've seen interviews of you and all the cast making fun of the Top Gun, the fact that you've been in Top Gun before of this movie. How did you relate these two jobs? How was Top Gun and Devotion? How did they came to you in your life? How did you relate them both? What did attract you to get those two roles that at first might seem very alike, but maybe in your experience are not? What can you tell me about this?
Well, I think what's really interesting, what a lot of people don't know, is that those roads started at different times than they were released. Devotion, I found the book years and years ago. So, started that journey. Top Gun came into that journey, ended up doing Top Gun, and I had the conversation with Black Label and our producers, and really had to ask them and the Hudner family, the Brown family, can I do both? Right? Is there room for both? And the answer, they said yes. I think they exist in two separate worlds, and the beauty of that moment of grace and that generosity is that I got to really learn so much on Top Gun. Tom Cruise gave me an incredible education in filmmaking, especially aerial filmmaking and storytelling, an education that I got to bring into Devotion. So the wonderful part is these are two very different stories in different eras about different types of heroes and wearing completely different uniforms and fighting different fights, right? At the same time, they still have aviation in them. Yep. And the wonderful part is that you got to use that technology. We have the same aerial coordinator that we did on Top Gun Maverick, Kevin LaRosa, and we got to use that technology, this IMAX technology, and put them on these old warbirds, these planes that have never been shot on camera, planes that we haven't made a Korean War movie in 40 years or something like that. So the logistics of pulling these planes from around the world, putting them in the air, required all these other logistical things that, with Top Gun, these $80 million fighter planes are sitting on the tarmac, ready to fly with the best of the best right there. So the complexities of those two movies were very, very different. But at the same time, I am a licensed pilot. I love aviation. I love being a pilot. And I will say that the spirit of aviation is one of those things that, for me, when I'm up in the air, one of the things I love about it feels like meditation for me, because the only thing keeping me between the ground or a smoking hole on the side of a mountain is my ability, my know-how, my ability to be calm, my ability to know the aircraft. And I will say that there's a accountability that came into this story, that same feeling of being accountable to individuals, to families, to stories, that legacy. I've realized, it was a phrase that Tom Cruise said on Top Gun, which was pressure is a privilege. And I realize now I really crave that pressure, because it is the greatest privilege in the world when you feel the right kind of pressure, not the kind of pressure that occurs with negative results, but it's the kind of pressure that makes diamonds. And I think that's what we did here, is we felt ultimate pressure to do right by these families. And I think the diamond is this movie that people will get to see November 23rd.
Well, guys, great talking to you. Really, I will spend here the rest of my evening, but I can't. So thank you so much. Enjoy the day. Have fun.
Right, thanks, man.